Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to Evolutionary Conversations. Thanks, Joe, for joining me with this. This is going to be a fun conversation. I'm excited about this.
Mm. It could go in many directions, couldn't it? So I'm intrigued. Yeah.
One, that's right. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
Um, all right. So, healthy love. Let's just start off with how this conversation began. Really, right? It was something about unconditional love.
Yeah, I think it was a post that I put up around healthy love, having healthy boundaries, and that was something that you responded to and asked if we could have this conversation. And as we kind of touched upon it, I think last week, and the topic of unconditional love came up. And it's something that would be great to unpack. I'm not sure there is an answer, but I think it would be fun to investigate really what we feel about that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think, like many things, it sort of depends on your definitions.
Mm.
And I know that, like one of the sub comments, I said, well, here's my premise. You can disagree with the premise, but, if we're given that. And for me, it really is. For me, there's two things. One is how do we use unconditional love when we say it? And the other thing is, what is love? And for me, if the person's not having the experience of being loved by us, I'm not sure I can call that unconditional love. If we have withdrawn and we can say, I'll always love you, but, I can't. And we might all truly always love them. But the question is that unconditional love because we have, in fact, withdrawn the experience of them being loved by us? And I want to circle back to what you said. There may not be an answer for this. Like there really, it really does all depend on your definitions. So, but that's mine. Like it really hinges on whether or not uh, unconditional love requires them to be having the experience of being loved by you. I think it does. Probably most people disagree with me on that. But I'm not. I'm not talking about when I say unconditional love. I'm talking about having the my personal experience of loving them because cool. I mean, I can have that with anybody any day of the week. Strangers are, or known to me. So, your thoughts?
Mm. Well, I think whenever I think about love, I come back to, or the definition of love, I come back to love as a vibration, as a high vibration. Love is healing. Um, love to me feels like a natural state. It's like coming home. And I think the only thing that gets in the way of love is fear. So if pure love carries this high vibration, anything, when we experience the vibration of love, it comes as a result of connection and acceptance and kind of drawing something similar or familiar into us. That's how I feel. We feel that oneness. So that could be with something or someone. So I'm probably talking broader. Obviously, you're talking there in a partnership, perhaps. But I think if we see something similar or familiar in something or someone else, we connect on some level and we draw that in and we experience a vibration of love. It raises our vibration. Um, and that comes as a remembering of our oneness. And that feeling is so free, it's beyond fear, and it transcends, when the mind gets involved, we start thinking and logic comes in, and our primal concerns with survival take over. But love transcends all of that. Love to me is the vibration that transcends body and mind. So it's body and mind are very three-dimensional, very earthly, and love is a vibration that transcends that for me. Um, and I think where the boundary bit comes in is that pure love without fear cannot lower its vibration, because otherwise it becomes not pure love anymore. So it's not an option to not be in that pure love vibration. As soon as fear comes in, we move into a lower state. And I don't see how, as earthly beings, we are concerned with survival, and how we can possibly remain in a state of pure unconditional love with anyone or anything.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I
The minute
think,
the minute we come into contact with reality, you mean?
yeah, pretty much, or earthly reality.
Like as long as
So
we stay in our as long as we stay in our own meditative state, that all works, right?
yeah, so I think we've had tastes of this unconditional love, which is kind of a taste of enlightenment almost. It's that high vibration that feels so, oh, I'm home. I don't know what your experience of that is, but that's my experience, and it is through meditation and being in love. It's an openness and a connectedness that transcends all of our fears. But I don't believe that we can remain in that state. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think so either. I mean, I think that all works in our own in isolation, or maybe for a few moments with
Mm,
somebody, right?
mm,
And then the minute patterns arise. So let's just talk. Let's talk about. I mean, we went really sort of high
mm,
abstract there. And for me, I don't disagree with anything you said. I agree with all that. It's just not like when it comes to a friend of mine used to say, when the rubber of possibility meets the road of reality.
mm,
Um, and sometimes it leaves a mark is what I used to add on to that.
mm.
Um,
Many a
sometimes
time.
it gets traction. Sometimes it leaves a mark,
Mm, mm. Yes.
skid mark, right across your forehead or your heart in this case.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so just looking at some of the things we wrote down, like the
Mm,
like true love has rock solid boundaries, or maybe we should say healthy love or adult love. I don't know what to say about and this is only we're only talking about. By the way, I always should add this caveat: we're not talking about children or dependents where
mhm,
they still have a fused identity. We're talking about two adults
mhm,
who are you know have adult emotional development. So true love is rock solid boundaries,
mm,
and we're responsible for our own boundaries. Um, and this is sort of a would you would you say, because I think that was your initial comment to me
mm,
was true love has rock solid boundaries. Could you say something
mm,
about that,
mm.
if you please?
I think, yeah, sure. So I think coming back into love or fear. So love has a high vibration, and we have to, I think, coming away from the idea of unconditional love, because I don't feel it's possible to remain in that state. So to be as loving as we can be, I feel we are responsible for our own vibration, for our own health, happiness. And I'm very aware that love, I love easily. I love people easily. I connect with people easily. I find common ground easily with people. So I don't have a problem loving people. I don't have a problem seeing beyond behavior. I'm very accepting and understanding. I feel that I have a pretty good capacity for compassion with people. However, I'm also very discerning as to where I put my energy or what I allow to to affect me or not. And for me, that has to be a boundary. So anything that is, if I feel something's beginning to lower my vibration and it's taking me into fear, or it's taking me into like doubting my worth, or doubting my value as a human being, that to me has to either change or go.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, I think it's I think you said a few things there that some people might often confuse with love. Acceptance or compassion and understanding, and those are all, I think, very different things. I think the discernment. Actually, I think we should back up and
mm,
what is a boundary? Um, and I have it that boundaries are required for a healthy self. And the metaphor I like to think of is that they're your immune system for life, in a way, which is why self-esteem is so deeply related to it. I think communities have an immune system. Like if they have rules, guidelines that you need to obey, I think that's a kind of immune system.
mm,
And then a process for ejecting, um, uh, you know, what do you call it? What is it? Oh my gosh, is ejecting the right word?
mhm.
Removing somebody from the community. That's a kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a boundary
Rejecting it. Yeah,
condition.
yeah. Mm,
I also think that the higher I've noticed that the higher somebody's self esteem is, the less they need to draw boundaries, but the more ease they have around it. And
mm,
I think that's twofold. One is they realize there's less fear. There's like, well, I don't need to have all these boundaries. Like, oh, like if you talk about somebody who's like, well, boundary this, boundary that, boundary this, boundary that, they probably have low self esteem.
mm,
The other thing is, if they have high self worth, their boundaries are going to be sort of woven into how they move through the world.
mm,
And so people are just less likely to pull shit on them. Um,
mm.
or thoughts.
I agree. A boundary is very much what's acceptable and what is not to you, and I totally agree that when we have high self worth, we don't feel the need to explain ourselves. We don't feel the need to lower into a kind of lessening ourselves. We don't need to lower our value in any way. Um, yeah, so it's what is acceptable and what is not. And for me, what is acceptable is it healing? Is it helpful? Um, is there a point to it? And if there's not, then um, it kind of gets rejected, albeit that can be lovingly rejected, and sometimes we can explain. I think it's important to explain why, and not sometimes, I think sometimes it's, if we value a friendship or relationship, to explain why we're making that decision. I think that can be helpful. Um, but yeah, ultimately, if you have high self-worth, self-esteem, boundaries are just natural, and they certainly have been for me over the years. It's become easier and easier for me.
Yeah, and I think it's all great points. I think the other important thing to note here is that if we're in a ongoing relationship and it's been codependent, which one of the ways I define codependency is the inappropriate dissolution of boundaries. Another way is perceiving your value through how the other person is assessing you. That's a separate matter. um, but in terms of the inappropriate dissolution of boundaries, if you're then going to retrain them, like essentially, like on notice, they might, at first they're going to be surprised that you're drawing a boundary, and they might be upset by it. And there might be a few times, because the nature of resentment, I have it, is continually allowing someone to continually cross your own boundaries and then blaming them for it, or being this is a technical term, wishy-washy about your boundaries, and then but you're being at victim around it. You're blaming them for it when really it's your responsibility to hold your own boundaries. It might be difficult. That's fine. It might be very hard. Somebody might be very influential. It might be really hard to say no to them. But there's going to be a period of time where they're going to get really upset, and they might even, it might cause conflict. So you have to be willing to weather that. You have to be willing to weather their upset with you as you're resetting or reclaiming your boundaries.
Yeah, totally. This is something that I work with clients a lot around, as they're trying to break old patterns, old cycles, something has to change. They have to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility for our lives, and we have to make change. And often that change isn't welcome by others, and it will probably go one way or another. That either they will,
we can count on it going one way or the other, right?
We can. But sometimes people, it's just a case of time and committing to that boundary, and being firm around that, and having the other person actually in time appreciate that, because it gives them clarity. It really strengthens the relationship. But if they can't accept that, then it's not such a healthy dynamic.
Yeah. Okay, just looking at our notes here from time to time.
Because ultimately, we're here to evolve, we're here to grow, and relationships need to evolve. That means change, and there's always going to be some kind of disharmony along the way as we evolve. So it can't be plain sailing. It can't be easy all the time, no matter who you're with.
Yeah, we're sort of upsetting homeostasis, at first, no matter what we're even if it's solo, right? Like getting out of bed to go to the gym if you haven't gone in a while, it sort of upsets the stability of the system. And this is no different. And it's worth reminding here, like I tell all my clients and all my students, that communication skills are physical skills. So communicating a boundary is a physical skill. So at first it might seem awkward. At first it might seem uncomfortable, but that's normal because communication skills are a physical skill. And I think it's really important to remember that, especially as you're interacting with another individual. I think there's something else that it came to me this morning too, is that having a lack of self-worth can actually cause some people to draw boundaries unnecessarily. Now, sometimes, they'll say no to a thing because they don't trust it. Their instincts are right. The person, like it's an unclean offer or something, strings attached or what have you. But at the same time, they're not that, like if you learn that in the past from somebody else or from a series of relationships in the past, somebody else, then you might be inappropriately bringing that into the space with this person. I'm not saying to ignore your instincts. I'm saying to just verify that it's not something unhealed from the past. But if you don't feel you're worthy of it, you might say no when you don't need to say no. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're better off saying no to something than saying yes, especially if you need practice at it. But I think it's something worth bringing up. Is they might draw a boundary unnecessarily if they don't feel they're, the two components of self-esteem being knowledge of your efficacy, which is about results and about feedback and then acceptance of your self-worth, which is about boundaries and about your priceless divinity. I think those two components. So if you're deficient in the self-worth category, you have trouble with your worthiness of receiving, you might say no when you don't need to say no, and it's actually safe to say no.
And I think that's something that, as friends or partners, you can work on as well. If a lot of times we bring old stuff into relationships just because we don't know any different, and because we've never witnessed a different way, and I think it's an element of obviously patience and perseverance when we feel that connection it's worthwhile in many examples, in many relationships. I think if you value yourself, you value your relationship, you value the other person, there's going to be, it's constant learning, isn't it? In any relationship, we learn through relationships, and because stuff's getting mirrored back all the time. So my way is to really understand what's the barrier here, what's getting in the way of acceptance and growth and receiving.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
part of it. For me, that's part of a healthy relationship.
Yeah. And one of the ways, one of the ways I think, so one of the reasons that when I work with clients, self-esteem is always a component, is because it really is, your knowledge of your efficacy and your feeling worthiness of receiving really affects you everywhere, in relationship and business. And if you don't feel you're worthy of a fulfilling relationship, and by the way, everybody is, if you don't feel you're worthy of a fulfilling relationship, you're going to stay in an unfulfilling relationship. Mm-hmm. And nobody needs to, and I've heard this. I heard this all. I was talking to somebody the other day, and she said her friends keep trying to convince her, that her standards are too high. And I was like, sounds like, and if somebody's telling you that, first of all, they're not, they're projecting their values onto you. And the other thing, though, which I think is lost in that conversation, is if you do settle for mediocrity, then if somebody extraordinary does come along that would be fulfilling, well, you're in that relationship, you may not even notice, or it leads to the abrupt disruption, or if there's ethical problems, it could lead to infidelity, or if there's any number of things that if you're not, if you've actually chosen something that's less than. But if we peer into those people and have a guess at why they would say that, I think a lot of them are just, they think it's better to be with somebody than to be in a fulfilling relationship. Most people are just afraid to be alone. They're afraid to be by themselves. And so, this causes all sorts of things. And I think that's a fundamental self-esteem issue. I also think you fundamentally aren't fit for healthy romantic love until you're comfortable being alone. Because if you're not comfortable being alone, you'll start to make choices that are a compromise of your principles or your desires or your standards in some way. Whereas if you are comfortable being alone, that doesn't occur. But one more thing before I hand the microphone back to you. There's something else. You said we've learned along the way. Another reason I do parental re-imprinting with every single one of my clients is those learned patterns, and we're either living in reaction against or in perpetuation of our parental imprints, for better or for worse. And that shows up around money, around relationships, around your view of the world, or yourself. Your thoughts.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think so many beliefs that we hold are inherited, and they don't actually belong to us. We're not born with those. So we carry so many beliefs that aren't actually ours. We move through life thinking that we believe this, that, and the other, but we really need to go on this journey of self-discovery and self-awareness to find out who we are without all of those things. So in a way, we kind of have to reject everyone, and almost come back to some kind of foundation to start again and start from something much healthier. So I think there has to be a lot of breaking down, breaking away in order to really discover who we are anyway. And it's only really and that's a lifelong journey. I mean, I'm nowhere near the point of truth or enlightenment or whatever you want to call it.
You're not?
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Oh my gosh, I have to end this call now.
I know you thought you were conversing with a guru.
Darn it!
But it
foiled
is just
again.
Me. It is only me. Yeah. So I think self-awareness, self-worth, self-value begins really when we reject everything, really.
Well, yeah, or at least begin to unravel. I mean, that's again, I hate to mention the process twice, but that's why I do print on reimprinting with clients, because it does unravel so much of that. And a lot of people, I call them, the thing you mentioned, I call them hand-me-down belief systems. And it most often shows up in religion. Like, that's the most obvious one. Like, I go to the church that I go to because my parents went to that church. But that's an example of things that show up that are much more subtle, like how you view men or women, or how you view government, or how you view the weather, or your beliefs around money, or I've already mentioned religion, but also spirituality. And we operate either in reaction against, to varying degrees, or in perpetuation of. It's either I'm not going to be like them, and there's this, when really maybe your authentic spirituality is your parents' spirituality, but you're in reaction against, or just the unmindful. I almost said mindless. Unmindful continuation. I'm just feisty today. The unmindful continuation of. So, I mean, that's always phase one with my clients. But yeah, they're absolutely. So I just label the things you talked about. I just label hand-me-down belief systems. They're just somebody else's worn clothes that they put on, and second hand, third hand.
Yeah, and in a way, those hand-me-down belief systems have been given to us to protect us or to contain us.
Yeah.
And
well intended.
Yeah, often well intended. And but of course, evolution means breaking that mold and choosing differently. And there has to be disruption. Disruption comes from that breaking through. So yeah,
or dissolving, or peeling back a layer and going deeper, and unfolding. I think there's, I don't think it has to be as much of a struggle as some people think.
Yeah.
I have a note here about us talking about codependence, addiction, giving your power away. There's a whole series of things here. Would you lead us off with? Would you lead us off with the codependence and addiction piece, please?
Yeah. So codependency for me is an addiction, and it is it comes from, again, lack. It's a fear of we're craving connection, but we don't really believe that we can have it through loving means, or we can't have it naturally, and so we have to kind of shut part of ourselves down in order to with addiction, there's a lot of suppression of self, and codependency. It's kind of, I think with codependency, it's often one person makes themselves very small in order to feel worthy of love, but they never actually get that love. They never receive that love. And it all comes from a fear of lack. It all comes from that low vibration, which again is low self-worth. Yeah, to me, codependency is very much an addiction that probably affects all of us to some degree throughout our lives. We come across certain characters that that perhaps we learn codependency from. I think none of us really avoid it completely. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Before I forget, I had a friend who was far more knowledgeable about codependency than I was, and they said that codependents actually they have a strong need for control also. And so sometimes, and I never viewed it that way, it sort of shocked me actually, because I look at being in control, like the last thing I would do to be in control would be to people please, right? Like it sounds like a interesting version of hell. It's like Dante's 10th ring or something. Or 10th level, or whatever that great piece of work says. An additional level below the worst of the worst. I can't believe it's a self-constructed hell. It
is.
But so I think that's interesting. Is it a kind of addiction? I mean, I know that they have a 12-step program for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's relevant, but there is a 12-step program for codependence.
I think it's very relevant. And actually, I have a book beside my bed that is very helpful. And I know that I've experienced codependency. I think to a degree with my mum. I think at a point we had to. Our relationship has always been very close, but I realised that I was trying to please her all the time, and it was becoming unhealthy. And in a way, our relationship had to break down in order for something better to be built. And we did work on that together, and our relationship is wonderful, very healthy. I've also experienced codependency with my youngest brother, who is drug dependent, and by me giving away my power, worrying about him, wanting him to change. And I see, I was talking to a client about this yesterday. When someone close to us who we love is living in a way that we can't possibly comprehend because it's so destructive,
Sure.
I had to surrender, basically. I had to surrender, reach a point of surrender and I had to come to kind of peace with the fact that he may kill himself. He may do severe damage. He may end up homeless. I was almost trying to prevent his downfall and becoming obsessed by it. What could I do? What could I do to help him? And it really lowered my vibration to a state where I thought, actually, this has to change, and I had to surrender and come to peace with, do you know what, this is his life, and if he chooses to live that way, that's what he chooses. I can still love him, but I'm becoming part of this addiction by wanting and needing him to change. So I get codependence. I do understand that. And that's my experience with it.
To answer your question that I don't think I answered it. we've all we can experience codependence to some degree in any relationship, or we have all experienced it to some degree. I think the short answer is probably yes, but also there can be a slow progression that we don't really notice, a subtle chipping away or a subtle erosion of healthy dynamics. And I know, there's one relationship in particular that I recall that the chipping away was so subtle, and the dynamics were so progressive that I didn't really notice for a while that it was happening. And I make the choice that I think a lot of people don't often make, or they're afraid to make. I would rather, if I look at how much I've attempted or tried or put into attempting to transform a relationship, I would rather start fresh with new dynamics, with no built up patterns, with no, like if you're in it for, and my experience has been that people stay in relationships far too long. I don't have it that, I mean, this is different for everybody, but in my experience, and the assessment I've had with people I've interacted with in the world, it's not an objective study, but my experience is they stay in relationships far past the expiration date, and they attempt to try things, and it's well intended. It's not necessarily attachment, or there's some societal pressure like you should work it out, or and somebody could easily, with a different viewpoint as mine, point to divorce rates and say, well, there's obviously not a lot of people trying to work it out. I don't know about that. I think people get into relationships for a lot of the wrong reasons. And so being really clearly defined up front and taking an inventory after every relationship about the qualities and characteristics you want, how that would show up, and being really vigilant about making sure that you take time after a breakup, and you look at that list again. You look at the qualities and you use that as a way to communicate your needs as well. I think those are really important things. But once you start to, as you talked about, once you start to feel less than, or you start to feel diminished, or you start to feel smaller in some way, especially for somebody else's comfort, that's a very, very slippery slope. Not to use a really overused cliche that's used everywhere, including in politics these days, but it really is a slippery slope. It begins to, once you decide to make yourself small for someone else's comfort, then that can lead to a codependent dynamic where your behavior is controlled by them being upset. And as you said, earlier in the segment, people are learning all the time. And if they learn a thing works, then they're going to keep doing it. And if you let it work, so you have to have enough metacognition to the dynamic of the relationship to step out, and enough self-worth to weather their upset. If you're not going to allow yourself to be manipulated or controlled by their emotional outbursts.
That's it. Yeah.
Apparently, some part of me felt very passionate about that piece.
Yes. Yes. So how could I follow on from that?
Well, I don't. Do you want to end there? Should we just end on that note?
We could do.
I mean, we've covered all the things we wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So
what's still? Want to leave with one final note on boundaries, or?
Well, I think the final note is that we are all worthy of love, and we are here to evolve and grow, and we need to be surrounding ourselves with people who encourage that. So we need to be choosing relationships that can assist us and help us move forward. Or, when I think about the people that love me the most, they accept me as I grow. And we're all worthy of that. And I totally agree that we need to be able to step outside of that relationship and look at the bigger picture and look at actually, what do I need from life? What do I desire from life? Am I on the right path here? Is it keeping me small? Am I here for the right or wrong reasons? And if we're not able to grow and be authentic, because I think there's a big thing around authenticity as well. If we can't be authentic, then actually that's a huge barrier to being loved. If we can't be authentic, I don't feel that people are able to love us because we're not actually showing them who we are. So, are we meant to stay with the same person forever? I don't believe we are. Um, but ultimately, if we're not able to grow within that dynamic, then it can remain loving, but just transform in a different way. So, I think anything that is bringing our vibration down, we need to be responsible for that and create healthy boundaries in order to be our most loving selves, because I think we're here to give our love and share our love. And if we can't be that, then we are going to feel squashed and resentful. So that's why I feel that healthy love and true love needs healthy boundaries.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't know that um, being inauthentic is a barrier to being loved. I think often inauthentic. I do think if you're not being authentic, they're not really loving you. They're loving whatever you're representing. But I'll also say if you feel like you can't be authentic around them, that's definitely not the right person,
Mm.
and it's not a healthy love. And it's funny. One of the things I'm fascinated by, whether it's in politics or whether it's in relationships or whether it's you know um, in our current cultural climate in general, is how much people are obsessed with controlling other people's behaviors.
Mm.
And if you start to feel that in your relationship, like that your behavior is being controlled, first of all, it's the wrong move. You're never gonna, unless you want to date people with low self-esteem, then go for it. But if you want to be in love with, in partnership with people who have high self-worth, which means they'll also give you the freedom to be, because that's just the nature of somebody with high self-worth, is they don't have a need to control other people, right? They're clear about their boundaries, but there's a lot less fear, there's a lot less anxiety, there's in general a lot less need to control outcomes or to control other people. um, but in addition, I think it's important that people, we talk, you and I make a lot of assumptions about the kind of relationship somebody wants, like that they're going to be involved in evolution, that they're going to be right, that they're going to be developing. And I think it's fair to say that you can have a conscious relationship for security. um, you know you-
Yeah,
just
yeah.
just know what you're going into it. If you want
Mm.
safety, security, you don't want to have to develop yourselves, because not everybody, I mean, I have a personal evolution's a lifestyle, not a thing
Mm.
you need to do to be, but it's actually just a way of being.
Mm.
It's a orientation to life. But I also think it's really important, if you're going to be involved in any kind of conscious relationship, that you start off by consciously deciding what kind of relationship you want, and set that up as a commonly agreed upon container, framework, intention at the very beginning of a relationship. Or if you're in one and you want to reboot it or transform it, or make it clear if you're going to continue to have it on life support or not, is to have that conversation about what it is you both want out of a relationship, what kind of relationship you want, and like that. Just like you would with a partner, like what are the qualities and characteristics you want in a partner? What are the qualities and characteristics you want in a relationship, and how would that show up? And to communicate that, and that way you communicate it in a way that's really about something you can both look at rather than pointing a finger.
Mm. Yeah, totally. So taking responsibility for your own desires, needs, communicating that
Yeah,
clearly,
yeah.
and
Well,
then that's a
nobody
great
else can.
foundation. Mm.
I'm halfway through leading an NLP practitioner training. It's 7-month training right now, and one of the students last week said, I'm realizing that all of this, like, it means that you're responsible for your experience, all of it. Like, because you have external stimuli, and then there's beliefs, distortions, internal computation, we call it. Like, there's
Mhm.
past experiences, what have you, and then you have an external reaction and response or external behavior. And yeah, nobody else can be responsible for your emotions, your experience. Nobody else can. Otherwise, you put yourself perpetually in the place of victimhood and at effect of how, like, you have no power because all of your power away.
Yeah, we need to take our power back.
Yeah, take your power
Put
back.
my big girl pants on and go for it.
Do you wear trousers? Are those legal in Britain now?
What, trousers? Trousers or pants?
I was just reading that there was some woman in the 30s who, it was against court rules, or it was contempt of court if a woman wore trousers, pants in court
Mm,
in the 30s. Isn't that amazing? I mean,
it
in the
is.
worst way. Amazing in the worst way. She got sent to jail twice. She was a witness.
Mm.
So she was sent to jail twice for contempt of court, and then she went ahead and she thought her point was made, and wore a dress. But women are required to wear dresses in court
Mm.
as
So
late as the 30s.
I wonder how that evolved. I wonder if it was through her rebelling that broke the mold.
I don't know. Having
Mm.
rules around what kind of clothing people can wear in a public space is kind of silly.
It is.
Um, Otherwise, they should all be, better color coordinated.
Well, yeah, that should be the law.
That's right. Anyway, what a weird place to end. How can people reach you, Joe?
You can reach me through my Facebook page. Um, you can reach me through my website, theevolutionofyou.co.uk, or just message me. I'm always open to conversations.
Thank you. Thank you again, as always. You can reach me through evolutionarycompanies.com. Been assisting people in accelerating their evolution for 16 years now, full time, with over 500 clients through one-on-one programs that last over 6 months. So you can find me there and we can have a conversation. Evolutionarycompanies.com, or here, wherever you're finding this thing.
Mm.
Thanks again, Joe.
Thanks, Jason. You